I have the distinct privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. Arianna Huffington is the president and editor-in-chief of AOL Huffington Post Media Group, which includes the highly influential Huffington Post, which she created just 6 years ago and now gets upwards of 23 million unique visits a month. A polymath political and media commentator and entrepreneur, Ms. Huffington is the author of 13 books on subjects as diverse as Maria Callas, Pablo Picasso, and America's vulnerable middle class. She is also a nationally syndicated columnist, co-host of Both Sides Now, as well as my favorite political roundtable program, NPR's Left, Right, and Center, and a frequent guest on television shows such as Charlie Rose and The Rachel Maddow Show. A native of Greece, she earned her degrees at Cambridge University, where she became president of the celebrated debating society, the Cambridge Union. Her skills in political debate led to roles as a political commentator and talk show host on the BBC before she moved to the US. Her bold, articulate, and independent persona, compelling vision, and entrepreneurial success led Time magazine this year to name her as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. You'll soon know why. Please welcome Arianna Huffington.
Thank you so much. It's always an honor to be speaking at a graduation. But for me, it's a special honor to be speaking at a graduation of graduates of continuing studies, because I've always believed, and I was blessed enough to have a mother who taught me that learning is a lifelong journey. And so it's great to be here to honor you who exemplify that with your decision to actually continue your lifelong learning and actually get a degree to prove it that you're continuing it. For me, it's also special to be here at part of NYU because the merger with AOL meant that I've moved closer to NYU. You know, our office used to be in Soho, and we've now moved to the AOL offices, which are at 770 Broadway and 9th, which is basically just a few blocks from the heart of the NYU, which means that as a result, I can now feel much more comfortable walking to work in my sweatpants. And the Huffington Post Soho offices used to be on top of a major landmark in New York. In fact, you would have tourists posing for photographs in front of this beacon that once used to welcome immigrants to America. I'm referring, of course, to Dean and DeLuca. I hear that there are at least 12% of graduates here who are international students, so I'm delighted to be speaking in an accent you'll recognize. And for those of you who may wonder what that accent is, I recently joked during a speech that I was actually born in Fresno, California. I said that I had cultivated this accent to give myself an air of being an ethnic minority, and which is very popular everywhere except in Arizona. And And I received 27 letters from people asking me, how exactly did you go about changing your accent? Which gives you an idea of a certain level of gullibility in the American electorate, which you must always be sort of aware of when you go back out in the world. I want to start by quoting someone who went to NYU but did not graduate, and that's Woody Allen. He said that more than at any other time in history, he said that during a speech to the graduates that he himself gave, he said that more than at any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness. The other path leads to total extinction. Let us pray, he said, that we have the wisdom to choose correctly. Now, I don't think that our choices are between total hopelessness and complete extinction. But there is no question that if you look at the world, you have the sense that you're watching a split screen. Depending on what you're focusing on, you see a world dying or you see a world being born. You see an old world order that's kind of disappearing and a new world order being born. I remember Jonas Salk, just before he died, saying to me, we are moving from what he called Epoch A to Epoch B. We are moving from a period that's dominated by competition and survival to a period that's going to be dominated by collaboration and meaning. And we are not there yet. So we are in between eras. We are in a real period of transition. And I know that every period, in a way, thinks they're in a period of transition. It's rumored that Adam turned to Eve and said, darling, we're living in a time of transition. But there's no question that some periods are more transitional, are more real turning points than others. And I believe ours is such a period. And as you're going back in the world, and I know many of you never left it because you've managed to combine getting a graduate degree with your jobs and in many cases your families. But as you're going back with this new degree, you know that the world out there is particularly harsh at the moment. There is no question that the economy is harder. Pew released a research paper today that shows that 34% of graduates are living at home. Did you know that? I don't know if parents are ready to welcome your kids back at home. But I have two kids in college, and I'm kind of maybe looking forward to having them back at home. But there's no doubt that 34% now are going back at home because it's harder to get jobs, it's harder to be making it on one's own. So that's the harsh reality. And that's why during those harsher times than we are accustomed to, it's more important than ever to see life as a journey and to tap into all the qualities that we have in us that are going to make it easier to navigate harder times. And I love the fact that the motto of the university includes the word persevere, because for me that's the key to everything. If you look at any successful life, you see that the one element in every successful life is perseverance. And the other element is failure. Stay with me, because often people look at failure as the opposite of success. And in fact, the truth is that failure is a stepping stone to success. There is no successful life that has not included multiple failures. It's just that we don't focus on them. We focus on people's successes. So my own daughters are tired of hearing me talk about my failures, because I always emphasize all the times in my life that I failed along the way. I say to them, for example, and regularly, that my second book was rejected by 37 publishers until they're tired of hearing it. But it's important, because what if after I received the 25th rejection, I said, well, you know what? I think I'm in the wrong profession. I obviously am getting enough feedback from the universe that writing is not what I should be doing. Instead, what I did, I was living in London at the time, I walked down the street, I happened to be on St. James's Street in London, and I saw a branch of Barclays Bank. I had run out of money by then, as you probably realize. So I walked into Barclays Bank. I asked to see the manager. I have no idea what kind of chutzpah consumed me. But I asked him if he would give me an overdraft. That's what they do in England. They give people overdrafts if they walk in with a lot of chutzpah. I didn't have any assets. I didn't have any kind of reason for him to give me an overdraft, but for some reason he did. And I still send him a Christmas card. His name is Ian Bell, and every year I send him a Christmas card. And the reason I give you that example, that story from my own life, is because I believe that if we look back on our lives, there are similar moments when, as in a fairy tale, there are helpful animals that come along the way and help us along our path. Isn't that the reason we love fairy tales? Because suddenly, you know, the hero or the heroine is lost somewhere in the forest, and a helpful animal appears and helps them along the way. So the world is full of helpful animals. Sometimes they're in the guise of human beings, but don't let that don't let that confuse you. The important thing is to look at the universe, despite all the harsh economic realities, And despite all the evidence of chaos and disaster that the dean mentioned in his speech, to look at the universe as a friendly place. And I say that as somebody who studied philosophy, and I never understood why the existentialists from Jean-Paul Sartre down thought of the universe as an indifferent place, as a place basically that was not a friend to us. Because in the end, I feel that there is something fundamentally trustworthy about the universe. And I think it's important to believe that because it makes our own journey with all its ups and downs easier to navigate. And what makes it easier to navigate is learning more and more to tap into that resilience, that sense of perseverance, that fearlessness, which is something that I'm particularly concerned about, because I feel that very often what stops us from fulfilling our dreams is fear of failure, fear that we're not going to measure up, fear that we're not everything that maybe the world thinks we are. And when I talk about fearlessness, I don't mean the absence of fear. I mean very simply not letting our fear stop us. Fear is perfectly human. But fearlessness is the recognition that we can get up after every time we fall down and keep going. And in fact, one of my favorite sayings that I have on my desk is from Montaigne, the French writer, who said, "There were many terrible things in my life, but most of them never happened." Because very often our fears are sort of in our heads. And they drive our decisions, even though they're not really based on reality. They're based on our own imaginations. And one of the things that I have found in my life most useful is learning how to unplug from everything that's going on in our lives, especially in our hyper-connected lives. I mean, especially in my case, but I'm sure in the case of all of us, living in a world where we are constantly connected, whether it's our laptops, our devices, our Blackberries, our iPhones, our iPads, who knows what's going to be created next year. I'm sure we're going to have it. I have actually learned to put a higher and higher premium on disconnecting from everything. And we are calling it, in fact, on the Huffington Post AOL Healthy Living site that we are launching today, we're going to have a new section dedicated to unplugging and recharging. Because nothing is more important, because as we become more and more hyper-connected, we are becoming less and less connected with our own wisdom. So if you look around, we have an enormous amount of incredibly brilliant leaders in media, in politics, in finance, making terrible decisions. The problem is not that they don't have high IQs. The problem is that they don't have wisdom. So what we need more than anything right now is wisdom. And so I hope that as you leave here with these graduate degrees, you're going to bring more wisdom to the world, because that's what we need more than anything. And I'm going to give you a tiny little hint of something that has helped me tap into my own wisdom whenever I tap into it, which is not all the time. And that's something which you may think is very trivial. You may think it's almost too trivial to mention in a graduation speech. But I want you to believe me, one of the most important things you can take away from my speech is the importance of sleep. And I look to the women here to lead the way, because for some reason, men have equated sleep deprivation with virility. I don't know why. But I was recently having dinner with a guy who bragged that he had gotten only 4 hours sleep the night before. And I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, you know what? If you had gotten 5, this dinner would have been a lot more interesting. So since men continue to brag about how little sleep they need, It's up to us women to lead the way and demonstrate that if we have enough sleep, we are going to be wiser, more productive, more creative, less reactive. And you know what, I always think that, you know what, maybe if Lehman Brothers was Lehman Brothers and Sisters, they might still be around. You know, maybe some Lehman sister would have woken up after a good 8-hour sleep and realized there was an iceberg about to hit the Titanic that all her sleep-deprived colleagues had completely missed. Because, you know, that's really the essence of leadership. The essence of leadership is seeing the icebergs before they hit the Titanic. It's seeing what's around the corner. And you are more likely to be able to do that when you're actually connected with yourself and your own wisdom and are able to see things before they actually are impossible anymore to prevent. And one more quote from Woody Allen. He said that he was thrown out of NYU in his freshman year for cheating on his metaphysics final. He said he looked within the soul of the boy sitting next to him. So I want us to keep looking into our souls, not just the souls of the boy or the girl sitting next to us, but especially our souls. One of my famous Greek philosopher compatriots said that the unexamined life is not worth living. And in many ways, we need to keep examining ourselves, examining our lives. And as Plotinus, you know, the famous philosopher in the 3rd century who studied the different sources of knowledge, put it, there were 3 sources of knowledge. The first was the simple, basic knowledge. Then there was wisdom. And then there was illumination. So our internet age makes it very easy to deal with the sources of knowledge that have to do with data, that have to do with the facts, that have to do with information. You know, we're drowning in all of that. But they make it much harder to deal with illumination, which is basically about wisdom. And that's what our world is really suffering from. That's as important as anything. And that's why it's important, even as you are graduating, to keep pondering all the big questions that we somehow leave behind when we leave the halls of education and knowledge. And I wrote a book in the 90s, which was actually probably my least successful book, so don't worry if you haven't heard about it, because probably nobody has. But it was called The Fourth Instinct. And it was about this belief that beyond the first 3 instincts of survival, sex, and power, there is that 4th instinct that drives us to want to find meaning, to understand the world, understand ourselves. And I feel this is the time when, to go back to Jonas Salk, we need to tap into that instinct more than ever. And let me just end by saying that graduating during this time requires more than ever to tap into all these inner qualities of resilience, of perseverance, of wisdom. And as you look around in the world, it's so easy to get discouraged. If we look at what's happening at the national political level, if we look at what's happening around the world, we see an enormous amount of suboptimal solutions to all our big crises. So because I'm fundamentally optimistic, both, you know, as a Greek, you know, Zorba the Greek is our natural symbol, and as a naturalized American, I mean, there is no more optimistic, naturally optimistic country than America. I really believe that in the end, we are going to prevail because of this incredible ability that we have to keep persevering, to keep tapping into all that is alive and vibrant in us, and to keep doing all that with a sense of joy and a sense of gratitude. And that's really the last thing I want to leave you with, because There is no promise anyone can ever make that life is going to be easy, but it's up to us to decide how we are going to deal with the difficulties. And if we can bring a sense of joy and a sense of gratitude to every day in our lives, it changes everything. That's what I keep telling my daughters, and my youngest one was 20 yesterday, and so birthdays and graduations make us rethink what matters in life. So my point to her was, you're going to go through all the ups and downs of life. But my point to her and my point to you is, if we can remember to be grateful every day for everything we have, for your families, for all the people who are here to love and support you, for the incredible opportunity to get a degree like you got here, and the ability to take all this newfound knowledge and wisdom and bring it out to the world that desperately needs it, that's something which nobody can take away. And as Colette said, there were many wonderful things in my life. I just wish I had realized it sooner. So I hope as you're going out in the world, again, please take that with you. Thank you and congratulations.